Tommy, can you introduce yourself to the audience and say a little bit about yourself?
My name's Thomas Whitelaw, and I was a full-time carer for my mum, Joan Whitelaw, and I cared for my mum from 2007 until the 22nd of September 2012. My mum had vascular dementia.
Thank you. Can you tell us about the time when you first recognised yourself as a carer?
I never recognised myself as a carer until we reached what I would call a crisis or mini crisis. I was a son. My mum had dementia. I was unsure what dementia was. I had no real understanding, and we reached a crisis. I was caring for my mum for a year before I even knew that there was such a thing as a carer.
Okay, so before you knew, when you say that you didn't know there was such a thing as a carer, did someone tell you?
Well, I came home to visit my mum, and I worked away and came back to visit my mum because I just, my own relationship, I lived in London, had broken down. And I came back to visit my mum, looking for my mum to put her arm around me in many ways. And for the first time as an adult, I had to really put my arm around my mother. And I thought I was just going to look after my mum and get her back on her feet for a couple of months. I took a break from work, and 3 months became 6 months, became 9 months, and a year. And I woke up one day and thought, we have to understand more about the situation that we're both in just now.
Okay. What was the situation that caused you to seek help?
Well, we reached, as dementia was doing everything in its power to affect my mum's greatness, her ability, her awareness, her chance to live, be included. I was falling apart beside her, and there was 2 lost people in our house. There was a son trying to look after his mum, and dementia had an impact on the both of us. And that got to a point where could I do this any longer? And I wanted to do the best I could. And that's what I started off trying to do. But it became so difficult that we reached a real critical point one day where I actually went out and to ask for help and didn't know where to get it.
So can you tell me what happened next?
Well, I can tell you exactly what happened that day. I took my mum to see her CPN, her community psychiatric nurse, because we were in turmoil, and in the same building was a social work department, and it was snowing that day, and we trundled down there, and I was in tears the whole way down, and my mum was in tears, and I asked for help, and someone handed me a post-it sticker with an 0800 number on it. And I walked out. As I walked in tears, I walked back out in tears, and felt that nobody was going to help us that day, that I had to find a way of us helping ourselves. And I woke up the next day with a different frame of mind. And that's when I discovered who our carer was, or support that was out there. But that was a fog. That was a constant fog and that came from a lack of understanding within me, because no one ever explained to me about dementia or what I was meant to do or what was going to happen. And too often, a lack of understanding from people, a lot with really good intentions, but didn't take time to see, how we were living or trying to live.
What kind of support was offered to you then?
There was support, and which was an ongoing thing after that, was that I kept finding out about support after it would have added value. I found that very frustrating in the 5 years caring for my mum, that lots of things, as I looked more and I had to go and look for it, things didn't seem to be promoted towards us or brought towards us to help us or prop us up. And if somebody props me up, I'll give my mum the best care in the world. But I felt frustrated over the 5 years that I kept finding out about support after, after it would have added value for my mum. My mum's, at that point in my mum's journey, it was no longer applicable in many ways. We'd passed that point. And when I sit and look back now, I think that's a bit of a tragedy.
Okay. Can you tell me about an example of a really good experience that you had in respect of the services that are out there to support carers?
Well, I can tell you one of the most. I look back and I can feel every mistake that was made, and I know as a son I tried to do my best, but I can't feel that. But I can feel the mistakes that I made in many ways and were made towards us. But I did my mum's personal care because I was on a waiting list. My mum was incontinent and I was put on a waiting list for 27 weeks. And in that time, with my mum's dementia, as many changes came along, we woke up one day and my mum was incontinent, and that's a dilemma of questions of dignity. I'm a son, it's a mother, and I learned how to bath my mum. I did it with my eyes closed for the first 6 or 7 weeks because I didn't know how my mum would feel about a son seeing her and cleaning, and the door went one day and the district nurse came, and because my mum had some pressure sores. And she was coming every couple of weeks just to check on them. I was changing them. And I just burst into tears. And because my mum was in the bath, nobody had ever come in at this intimate or delicate moment of a son having the bath in his mum. And she sat me down and she put her arm around me and she told me I was doing okay. And I needed somebody to tell me that, But not only that, she showed me how to dry my mum better and she showed me how to set her up. And that difference stays with me today. If I met her walking out this door just now, I would shake her hand and tell her thank you, because we needed that. We needed somebody to tell us, to help us understand, to show us and encourage us. Quite often, when you ask questions as a carer, the first reaction is, "Oh, can you cope? Are you unable to cope anymore?"
Can you tell me about an experience that wasn't so good?
I think my mum, well, there's good, but absolutely a bit of inspiration behind this as well. My mum was very rarely in hospital. My mum's journey with dementia, I cared for her at home 99% of the 5 years. My mum was in a couple of times over the years, but in the last 2 months of her life, my mum was in 3 times for a week at a time. My mum was deteriorating and she had a seizure. And I feel that at that point of separation, of understanding, my mum could no longer speak. I fed my mum, I dressed my mum, I brushed her hair. I didn't feel as if I was part of, it's a separation where I feel I could have added a lot of value. I could have told them when my mum chaps her lips, she wants a drink. So I sit at home worrying, is my mum having a drink? But every day I went up, my mum never had her glasses on. 5 days in a row. So my mum, who could no longer speak, could no longer talk, could no longer lift her arms, was always lying back with no glasses on when they'd changed my mum. And I felt that was denying my mum her chance, because of so many things that had been affected by awareness. So my mum's lying there and hearing noises, and she's used to being in the quietness of her house and the gentleness of her son, to this noisy, environment. And I felt that was difficult. But in my mum being let out, my mum could no longer swallow anymore. She was having great difficulty with fluids. She could still eat soft solids. She would understand how to eat them, but she couldn't drink fluids at all. And she was a bit dehydrated. And when my mum was let out, they forgot to put in the bag when I was leaving the mixture for me to mix. And it was forgotten to be put on the prescription. And I spent a day in the chemist crying. And this was actually 3 days before my mum died. But they wouldn't give me it because the hospital has to fill the prescription. And I phoned the GP in tears, and he said, I can't prescribe it, it must come from a hospital. I says, but they've let my mum out and they've given me a tub with very little in it. It's a Friday, we're going over the weekend. And I called the hospital in tears, and the nurse, a speech therapist from the hospital, drove to my house in a lunch break with a tin of fluid mixture and sat with me for an hour and showed me how to do it. That's brilliant, isn't it? That's remarkable, but I shouldn't have to be in that position, you know. So I do value the good. When I look back, I value that, to show the compassion and the understanding, and sat. And I have to say, she sent me an email a couple of weeks after it to say that she felt it was a privilege to sit with my mum, and it absolutely was.
Thank you.
If you ask me, the biggest failing in many ways about, or lack of understanding, is summed up by, my mum's name was Joan Whitelaw. She was born on the 15th of the 7th, 39. Her parents died when she was 4 and 7, and her big sister brought her up. She put her arm around her and took her in. And that was the building blocks that made my mum the kind and caring person she was. And she went out and she worked hard, and she met my dad, her only ever boyfriend, and they fell in love, and that was the beginning of a love story. And then she cared. My dad didn't keep well in the last 10 years of his life. And my mum became the breadwinner, and she worked in the Paisley Mill for 14 years. She went out at night, and she worked night shift, and she'd be there in the morning to get us ready for school. And after school, for going to work, she'd get us out the door and be there with dinner and look after us, and worked hard to take nothing for herself. And when my dad died, her heart was absolutely broken. And that's a really short description of my mum. But if anybody's watching what I'm saying just now, they now know more about my mum than anybody involved in her care for the last 5 years. Because nobody ever asked who she was, what she'd done, who she loved, what she liked, what she disliked. They viewed her as just a wee woman with dementia. And she was never that. She was a magnificent. And her name was Joan Whitelaw.
Tommy, thank you very much for sharing your story with us.
Thank you.